the other side that really, moving from my career to a leadership role was something that was kind of like, and I talked about this in another episode, but like just kind of a smack in the face wake up call of like when you were with the Chiefs, it was like you were doing everything. Like it was just you put your head down, you have,
Yes.
100 hours worth of work to do, you're
Right.
doing it, you move on. Then, and that's basically what I was doing with the Steelers. Then moving to the Cardinals, it was like, well, no, no, no. Like you don't have to do all the stuff that you've been doing and that you're good at. You have a team to do it now. So now your job is to make sure that they can do that stuff. And it
Yeah.
was like just learning an entirely different language and just a new world altogether. So I'm curious, like going from early on, like with the Chiefs and kind of being a one-man band, like you said, and now being a leader of a company, not only just like a smaller team, how was that transition and how has your kind of leadership journey shaped who you are now?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's that transition kind of happens gradually at a startup because when we started the company, we're all just grinding individually, right? And that is the same sort of mode of, like when you're running the social accounts yourself and you're just like, all right, I'm going to do all these things. And like, these are the things I want to do. And I just need to like put the time in and work. And then obviously, you start growing and we raise some investment and we're building a team. And then you transition to like managing a few people. And then as that team grows, those things like grow. You know what I mean? Your managerial responsibilities grow. I think at a startup, you're always doing a lot of both, which is fun, but also makes it hard, and you need people who don't necessarily need to be managed that closely because everybody is so busy and they need to be able to be super proactive and have their own like owner mindset of like, I'm just going to be able to do this and help take the company to the next level. But yeah, I mean, managing people is probably the hardest thing, of that I've done in my career. Um, you got to meet people where they are, and everybody is at a different place and needs different things, and something will always come up, no matter how like strong your team is and how great everybody is to work with. There's always going to be something to kind of deal with. So you just have to be like ready for that and ready to react in a way that is like compassionate, but also true to like your values and the rest of the team. It's not always about making everybody feel great because they sometimes what they're doing affects like the rest of the team and vice versa. And like there's just a fine line between wanting to make everybody feel good and happy. That's almost your first instinct as a manager when you're new to it, is like, I'm gonna be the cool manager that like everybody likes. And then there's the like, okay, um how do I get the best out of people, which doesn't always mean like I'm just a cheerleader, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And set clear expectations, but also manage my own workload. Set boundaries on where we can have conversations and where I want you to do things. And, I always like to get in the weeds. And I think that sometimes could be to a detriment, right? You want people to not feel like they have to ask you for everything.
Yep.
And they may not be doing that because they don't have the answer, but you may have just like gotten in this rhythm of like putting in your opinion of everything that they're doing. And that sometimes doesn't give them enough autonomy to get stuff done on their own. So you really sometimes have to be like, if you have an idea or they say something or your team says something, you got to pick and choose where you decide like, hey, actually, no, I want it this way. Because the more often you insert your idea, like the less the team is going to feel like, okay, I could just take this and run with it without having to come to you. And that's obviously what you want, is to
Yeah.
be able to, like, in the best working relationship, the people that um, you work for, you take things like off of their plate and make them better, and they help unlock things for you. And in the worst, you feel like you're being micromanaged. You can't do anything without checking in with them, and vice versa. like you feel like you have to spend time managing someone versus them doing that line of work while you're doing the other line of work. So yeah, you kind of learn that over time, but it's always like evolving. And I'm sure, I mean, that's true for any manager, startup or otherwise, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, and it was the hardest thing was like figuring out and understanding that not everyone has the same mindset or skill set or and maybe not skill set but just like the way that I work, and it's like I'm in the weeds, I'm in the details, I like to plan things out in advance. Anytime that I have a minute to myself, I'm going to schedule stuff for the next week or develop copy, or so it's like that was the hardest thing, was like you said, meeting people where they are. It's like just because someone doesn't do things the way that I want them or the way that I would do them doesn't mean that they're not doing it correctly. So it was like, my graphic designer in Arizona for a while, who is absolutely incredible, one of the best designers in the league. But
Yeah.
him and I kind of butted heads because I kept telling him how I wanted things to look, and he'd be like, "Well, but I kind of like it this way," and it was like, "No, no, no,
Right.
do it my way." And then as we kind of grew together, it was like, if I trust you and your skills and how good you are, why am I telling you what these should look like? So it was like that was a really kind of my first wake up call of just like, if this person is as talented and amazing as you think they are, why are you telling, the creative, amazing designer how it should look when he's showing you how it should look and you're just not getting it?
Totally. Yeah. I feel like with design too, it's like everybody has an opinion, and that's where it gets really hard because there's no technically like right or wrong, unless you're like, hey, we need a sponsor on that. That's like come
Right.
from this, or this is why we like can or can't do that. But if it's just like aesthetic taste, um, that's where things get there. There's a lot of little versions of that. But yeah, design specifically with social, it's kind of just like if you send it to seven people, they're gonna have like seven different opinions. And
Yeah.
I'm sure those like yeah, people who aren't involved in social or design will chime in of like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or send you an example of some other thing of like, hey, look at what they're doing. It's like, what are
Yeah.
you implying?
Yeah. Oh man. Well,
Yeah,
and it's like, and that's something that I've been trying to do better at. And it's like when you bring, if you're hiring these people and you're bringing them in, and you're obviously hiring them for a reason, they're talented, why try and stick them in the exact box of how you think they should do this job? It's like if you hired them, you should trust them to be able to do what they do and how they do it best, rather than like, no, 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 like this is how I want things done. Do it that way.
totally. Yeah. I mean that's when I think the working relationship works the best. It is just like full trust. And if you can't trust them, you got to work with them as to like why is this not happening? Or I I always think people should be like very, very autonomous, and be able to just like figure shit out, like define success. And like, if you don't know what that looks like, you're still just like pushing forward with something and checking in about like, is this successful? Like, check out this, you know? And again, I think sometimes that's like an unrealistic expectation for certain people, especially like early in their career. And it's like hard to teach that, because it's easier to teach like, hey, this is exactly how I want it done. But it's harder to teach like sometimes you just need to make your presence felt. And if you don't know what success looks like, it doesn't mean you're just kind of like, well, I'm not getting enough direction. It means like, I'm going to try this thing. Then I'm going to show my boss what I tried and tell them why I did it this way because I thought this would be effective. And then go from there. Like, just keep. And that's the sort of stuff that I think I learned earlier on when I was in positions where I almost like didn't really have a boss and was like, okay, I'm reporting to someone at the NFL who doesn't care about like the Chiefs day to day, and the people at the Chiefs like brought me in to do this, but they don't have direction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, back to that, but I think that was like a super helpful experience because of that. And anytime for people kind of early in their career, you know, everybody early in their career wants more like direction and like specific guidance. And then you get to later in your career and you're like, man, I wish I had less oversight and guidance. And wasn't that nice? Like, I had a boss my first few years. This is hypothetical, but like who my sister actually like said this very thing is like her first few years in the working world, she was just like, well, I'm just kind of here. No one's telling me what to do. And now she's like, I wish I had that now, but it's hard to learn that. And yeah, early on, you want like people to coach you and stuff, but there is a benefit to being kind of just dropped in the deep end and having to figure it out for
Yeah.
yourself because that is what work ends up being, as you go further up in your career, like a lot of stuff is on you to figure out and to find success from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, one of the things I always say is like freedom is amazing, but uncertainty is really scary. So it's like you're trying to figure out how do you thread that needle of like, I don't want you just floating in the abyss trying to figure something out that you don't know that you're equipped to do, but I also don't want to be hovering over your shoulder saying like, well, did you think of this? Did you think of this? Did you think of this? And
Exactly.
it's like, yeah,
It's yeah, that's why being a manager is like the hardest thing.
it's
Yeah,
true, man. It's true.
it really is.
All right. So to wrap up this leadership chat that has been amazing and honestly like so helpful for me too, just because I mean, I've been doing it for, over a decade now, but I've been a leader, half the time and probably less than half the time at this point. So it's like I'm trying to read books. And luckily, like with the Pirates, we have a leadership academy, which is crazy. And I've never had anything like that before. So it's like it's kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different things and different ways of doing things that I didn't know before. Um, but basically, like if there was one piece of advice that you could give to, a new leader, going into that first role, Zach going into his role with the Cardinals, like what would be that one thing where it's like, if you can at least start with this, everything else you'll kind of have to learn as you go.
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess the best piece of advice would be like foundational is you got to meet with the people on your team like at least once a week, right? Like it's basic, but not everybody does it. And that one-on-one time shouldn't be about you telling them like what they need to do. It should be their time and you're there to like listen to them, right? Like they should be the ones to feel like, okay, I have this meeting time where I get to say what's happening, what I want, what I need. It's not a time where my boss is telling me all the things I need to have on my to-do list and checking in with me on the things I've done. That should happen like elsewhere. Like that you shouldn't need that one-on-one to be figuring out those sorts of things. That should be happening throughout the week and otherwise, where that one-on-one is really where you could like sit back and listen. And that's like your main goal is to like understand their motivations and their psyche and their what makes them excited, what makes them not like if they are doing the tasks, yes or no, because that's like you got to understand them and where they're coming from if you want to build good relationships, which will lead you to like actually getting the most out of them and them being honest with you. Cause that's in the end what you need is them to be honest with you. And if you don't build enough of a foundation for them to be honest with you, like everything else kind of falls apart, you know? So um, it starts with the time and just making sure you have the one-on-one and never move that one-on-one or cancel it and say like, okay, we'll do this next week because then you're going to signal that it's not important, unless
Sure.
you really, really have to. That one on one should be as in, like, you would never do that to your boss and just say, hey, actually, can we meet next week? Like, that just shows that, okay, I'm the second priority. I don't really matter. So having that one on one and then just using it as really like a time to listen is a good like foundation for new leaders. Like you're not there to just like direct somebody. Like just start slow and like understand who they are as people, and then you'll start to be able to um, get their best effort, and at least they could be honest with you if they're saying, hey, I'm not into this, or this isn't working, or this is a huge problem. um, they should feel comfortable telling you what's really happening.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's amazing advice. And again, if Zach going to the Cardinals would have known that earlier, I think it would have been a little bit better of a situation. But yeah, it's hard. Like you said, like I'll have meetings where I end up talking for 35 minutes straight, and I'm like, man, like what was the point of that meeting? Like, what did anyone
Right.
get out of it except for they just knew every detail of everything I had to say? It's like, how can we, not only have meetings, but have productive meetings and have them be, not just, a placeholder on your calendar that's another thing you have to do every day, but how do you make them, valuable and make them, helpful to everybody?
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. You can't just kind of dump all your thoughts onto your team. You got to like pick and choose.